The role of inheritance in development. So, okay, we inherit all sorts of things from our parents, all sorts of traits and characteristics and behaviour. So in this video, you're going to learn about how inherited characteristics pass from parents to children. There are quite a few key terms that you'll need to learn, and you'll see them on the next slide. So pause the video for a moment when you get to it, make a list of them, so that at the end of the video you'll be able to go back over those key terms and give a definition. You'll need to bring those definitions along with the notes that you make to your next lesson. These terms are key to understanding inheritance and how our genes influence our characteristics, our traits and our development. So we're going to describe genetic inheritance and the influence of chromosomes and genes on development and behaviour. So the key terms then: gene, chromosome, DNA, trait, conception, genotype, phenotype, ovum, individual differences, dominant gene and recessive gene. I guess you've probably heard most of those before. Certainly if you did GCSE science or biology, you've probably come across them. So we're probably recapping something that you've done when you were at school, but it's really important in this exam because you could actually be asked to explain how characteristics are passed from one person to another or one generation to another. So pause the video and just make a note of all those key terms before you go any further. So really, we're looking at genetic factors. Genes are a series of, or rather a section of a DNA molecule. The DNA is coiled up really tightly, and that's what forms the arms of the chromosome. If you remember back to chromosomes when you were doing science at school, we get X and Y shaped chromosomes. The majority of them are X. In fact, if you're female, you've only got X shaped chromosomes. But more about that later. So the DNA is a long coil of information, and short sections of that DNA are actually genes. Chromosomes, DNA and genes. Okay, so human chromosomes. There are 23 pairs in each individual, and each pair has been numbered, as you see on the diagram there. Scientists, molecular biologists, can actually identify them in each cell. So almost every cell in your body has got 23 pairs of identical chromosomes if you're female. If you're male, you'll notice that the 23rd pair is slightly different. It's not very well clearly illustrated there, but they're called X and Y chromosomes. And the 23rd pair of chromosomes determine whether they're male or female. We'll look more about that in another video. But the other 22 pairs, they're all numbered and they all carry particular genes. So a section of a chromosome, a short section, is actually a gene. And there are thousands, if not more, genes on every chromosome in your body. And they carry vital information. Genes are inherited from our parents. We get one from each parent on each chromosome. So children inherit 2 genes for each characteristic. One comes from mum and one comes from dad. So almost the only cell in the human body that doesn't have 23 pairs of chromosomes is actually the sperm or the ovum. The sperm has 23, the ovum has 23. So when an ovum or an egg is formed, then one of those pairs of chromosomes will go into that egg. And in the sperm, one of the pairs will go into the sperm. But it's random, depending on which pair it is. So therefore, each individual person, that's you and me, has 23 chromosomes from mum and 23 chromosomes from dad. But each pregnancy is random. So although as family members we share similar characteristics, we're never actually going to be identical unless we're a twin. But again, more of that in another video. So it makes us a unique individual, but we will share some similarities with other people in our family. More about genes then. The two different versions of genes, they can be either dominant genes or recessive genes. You probably did that at school too. Can you remember the difference? The difference is really important. The dominant genes are always dominate a recessive gene. Therefore, it will show the characteristics or the trait in an individual. So, for example, brown-eyed gene is a dominant gene, but a blue-eyed gene is a recessive gene. So if we're thinking about eye colour, the brown-eyed gene is dominant. Any child that has a brown and a blue-eyed gene will only have blue eye colour. So if you inherit a brown-eyed gene from mum and a blue-eyed gene from father, then that child will have brown eyes. Think back, why is this? You need to write a definition of a dominant and a recessive gene at this point, so you might want to pause the video again. Let's look at this a little bit further. Again, pause the video and draw yourself a diagram, just like the one you see in front of you. Two squares at the top, one to represent father, one to represent mother. What we're drawing is genetic diagrams. So father has brown eyes. We can see that because his two genes, represented there by BB, he's got a big B, capital B. Dominant genes are always drawn in diagrams with a capital letter because they're dominant, whereas a recessive gene would always be a lowercase letter. In this case, I've put them in colour to help you see the difference. So Dad's got a dominant brown and a recessive blue, but so has Mum. So what colour eyes will Mum and Dad have? That's right, they will have brown eyes because they both have that dominant brown-eyed gene. So, in any pregnancy, father's going to pass one gene through the sperm to the future offspring. So that could be either a brown-eyed gene or a recessive blue-eyed gene. Mum is going to do exactly the same. The box below, with the 4 boxes, shows you the possible combinations in every pregnancy that these two parents could actually have. So, if we look at Dad, who can pass a brown or a blue-eyed gene to his future offspring, when he has a baby with his partner, who has a brown and a blue-eyed gene, what are the possible combinations? So, we could have 2 brown-eyed genes. We could have a brown and a blue-eyed gene. Use the box like you would do when you're doing coordinates. We could have, again, a brown and a blue-eyed gene, or we could have 2 blue-eyed genes. For these two parents, in every single pregnancy, they are the possible combinations that they could have. It helps to illustrate, this box helps to illustrate, the possible combinations of any children and therefore the eye colour that those children might have. So these two parents have got a 1 in 4 chance of having a baby with brown eyes and a brown-eyed, both with 2 brown-eyed genes, beg your pardon, or 2 out of 4 chances, 50% chance, of having a baby with brown eyes but who also carries a blue-eyed gene, which he or she could pass on to their own children. Or a 1 in 4 chance, 25% chance, that actually their baby, their child, will have blue eyes because it will have only picked up the recessive blue-eyed gene from both parents. So where there's a dominant gene, that is the characteristic that shows in the child. And there are important terms used to describe this. So a genotype is what we see here. That's the gene pattern of the children that these parents could possibly have. 4 different possibilities, or in actual fact 3 different possibilities from the 4 combinations. Then a new name, the phenotype. The phenotype is the characteristic that children would have. So for every characteristic that we have, in this case eye colour, it could be hair colour, it could be whether our hair's curly, it could be whether our tongue rolls, then we pick up a gene pattern from our parents or pass down from our parents. The gene pattern we have is our genotype. The phenotype is the characteristic that the children actually show. So that's more the physical thing that you see in the child. Straightforward? Yeah, okay. But we're looking at something really simple. We're explaining genetic inheritance in a very simplistic way. For some characteristics, there are lots of genes involved, but you only need to know how it happens in simple terms so that you can explain it. So let's look at the next one. Let's imagine we have father who has blue eyes because he's got 2 recessive blue-eyed genes, mum who has brown eyes because she has 2 dominant brown-eyed genes. What I want you to do is draw a diagram, as you see on the screen in front of you, and then come back to it after the video's finished and fill in those combinations and come back to class tomorrow with the diagram with the genotype in it, and then underneath write the phenotype, the characteristics or traits that any children from these pregnancies could actually have, and what will be the percentages. So what's the chances that their children would be brown-eyed, totally brown-eyed and carrying 2 brown-eyed genes, only having blue-eyed genes, or actually having a dominant brown-eyed gene and a recessive blue-eyed gene. 3 things you're looking for: brown-eyed, 2 brown-eyed genes, blue-eyed with 2 blue-eyed genes, and a brown-eyed but carrying a blue-eyed gene. These are called individual differences, the characteristics that we see between different children. When you've done that, you can then look at this example. This example is for a disease. So far we've talked about characteristics, physical characteristics like eye colour and hair colour being passed from parent to child. But it's not the only thing that we pass. At the moment of conception, when the egg meets the sperm and the 23 chromosomes are passed on and they find their partners and pair up 46 to make 23 pairs, then all sorts of things can be passed from parents to children. And one of them is actually diseases. Cystic fibrosis, you learnt about in Unit 5, is a disease that's passed on by genetics, a faulty gene. And in this diagram, this condition is passed on by a faulty recessive gene. So you see it's written by a small CF to show it's a recessive gene, whereas the dominant is written by a large CF. So work out this one. For these children, these parents, for any children they have, any pregnancy, what are the chances or the percentages of having children that are healthy, that have 2 dominant CF genes, children that are healthy because they have a dominant CF gene, but they're a carrier of a recessive CF gene, and children that have 2 cystic fibrosis genes and therefore will actually have the condition. So what will their particular characteristics or phenotypes be? Don't forget to look back at those terms, make sure you know them and can write a definition, look it up if you're not sure, and then carry out the 2 examples of genetic inheritance using the diagrams, the eye colour one and this one for cystic fibrosis, and bring it all to class with you for the next lesson. Okay, see you then. Bye.